It's never been more important to fix our eyes on things above and to become disciples of Christ who live in the kingdom, who grow courage and boldness to be able to speak up when we need to. And again, wherever you fall on the political dimension of these things, I think considering the kingdom dimension of what is required of us as followers of Jesus.
Hello, this is Russell Moore. Wendell Berry said to be sane in a mad time is bad for the brain, worse for the heart. And here's where we try to get some gospel sanity to lose our lives without losing our minds or our souls. And that's why I'm really excited to have the guest that we have today, because I don't know, a few years ago, maybe a couple of years ago, I came across this song that a friend sent to me called Citizens, and especially this part. Listen to this.
There is a wolf who is ranting, all of the sheep, they are clapping, promising power and protection, claiming the Christ who was killed by a common consensus, everyone screaming Barabbas, trading their God for a hero, forfeiting heaven for Rome. Coming to you cause I'm angry, coming to you cause I'm guilty, coming to you cause you promised to leave the flock for the one. I need to know there is justice, that it will roll in abundance, and that you're building a city where we arrive as immigrants, and you call us citizens, and you welcome us as children home. Where we arrive as immigrants, and you call us citizens, and you welcome us as children home. Is there a way to love always, living in enemy hallways? Don't know my foes from my friends, and I don't know my friends anymore. Power has several prizes, handcuffs can come in all sizes, love has a million disguises, but winning is simply not one.
I mean, that's incredible. And since then, I have listened to everything that this artist has put together. As a matter of fact, according to Spotify, I'm in the top 1% of his listeners. And I said that to my wife, and she said, well, how could you not be? Because it's almost on a continual stream. How could anybody listen to it more? So I wanted to talk to Jon Guerra, who has a new album that has just come out called simply Jesus, and it's amazing too. And I want to talk about several of the themes that are in this album and how this came about. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Russell.
You know, it's really good to talk to you, especially because I saw that you said the reason you wrote this album is because you felt you needed to be reacquainted with Jesus.
That's right.
And I have experienced that before. What does that mean to you?
Well, you know, we're so inundated with other voices, and we want to be responsible Christians in the world that we live in. So we want to stay up to date with what's happening, and that's good and fine. But I think really to be washed in the words of Christ is the only protection, and really the only way to stay sane in a world that really is a bit topsy-turvy, I guess. It feels like the times are troubled, the world is increasingly unstable, truth is more of a rare commodity. And it's never been more important to dwell in, to meditate on, and really to come into contact through the words of Christ, come into contact with the real and living, though invisible person of Jesus Christ. And that's kind of where this album both personally came from, and then that was my desire for the listeners, is that it would facilitate some kind of re-meeting. It's like, this is what we're about. Remember, this person is very special, and he's not just a figurehead, and he's not just we can't just live on secondhand knowledge. We need to come into contact with his words. And that's where the really desire came from.
I did not realize until yesterday, actually, as I was preparing for this interview, that you started out writing jingles for commercials.
That's right.
And I'm wondering what the transition is like to going from starting off writing things to sell stuff to writing things about being free from stuff, as we'll talk about a little bit later. I mean, it seems to be a completely different mindset between the two things. What's different about writing a song like some of these?
Yeah. So when I was in my early 20s, I got this job at a jingle house. We were writing songs for commercials, and usually they were no more than 15 to 30 seconds long. And it was actually a lot of fun because you're trying to get people's attention right away, and you're trying to come up with something that is easy and simple and listenable. And I would say, just simplicity is still very important to me. Now it's simplicity aimed at a different direction. To your point, I think I'm trying to write music that helps us kind of maybe slow down a little bit. I think I'm situated in the Christian music industry, and there's really three ways of being a musician nowadays in the Christian music industry. You can be a worship leader and write worship music, whose end is congregational singing. You can write Christian contemporary music, whose end is the radio, which is a little bit more like a jingle, frankly. Mm-hmm. Or there's this third way, which is you're not really working backwards from an end the way singability or radio music. You're kind of trying to work forward and respond to beauty, whether it's the beauty of the music or the beauty of the text or the beauty of the poetry, and trying to steal upon the subconscious, I guess, as a director that I've worked with likes to say, steal upon the subconscious so that it kind of awakens something in the person, the way beautiful things do, whether it's a sunset, whether it's falling in love. There's these experiences where reality kind of spills its boundaries, and these are experiences of beauty. And that does something different to us than maybe a song that's meant to elicit worship or singing the way corporate music is, or a song that's meant to make us feel really good in the afternoon the way radio music is. And so, I'm trying to combine those experiences of beauty and then the words of Christ, so that if people wake up and listen to the songs, they can just come and hopefully experience afresh something of these words that we've heard, if you're a Christian and have been for a long time, words that we've heard for a long, long time.
How do you get people past the familiarity? If you think of what C.S. Lewis talked about with Narnia, he's trying to creep past the watchful dragons of familiarity that has taken a lot of these words and concepts and put them in stained glass in people's minds. How do you get around that, where there's kind of a nodding to blessed are the meek. Right. So, I mean, you have to do it very subtly. I mean, that was a major concern for the record, because you really, it's sort of like when you're making a Jesus movie, it's very easy to feel like you're watching a pageant or something, like you're watching some kind of Easter play. And so similarly, it can very easily turn into, like, these are jingly sing-alongs to these songs, which aren't necessarily all bad. I mean, I've got two little girls, and hearing them sing scriptures, like that's the highest possible use for these songs. But at the same time, you use music to sort of juxtapose what's coming at you emotionally. So if I'm singing about treasure, for instance, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, I'm trying to find kind of the center of longing, I guess. What is, like, how would that have landed for the people when they first heard it? And how does that hit me now? Where does it find the place where it kind of hurts and almost sing from that?
and then to use poetry and use my own experience as kind of a juxtaposing narrative in it, for relatability's sake, and really just for vulnerability is a very powerful thing in lyrics and in poetry. And again, that's something that you kind of have to toe a fine line, because you don't want to be expositionist or something, or have it be like, whoa, put that away. But finding that fine line where you're bringing yourself to it. And the song you mentioned earlier, Citizens, was kind of a version of that, where I'm looking around at what's happening and then trying to look at myself, like, where am I guilty? Lord, I am angry, and I know I'm just to blame. So help me out here, Lord. I guess it's for the listeners to decide if I did that well on this record, but I did my very best, at least.
Well, here's an example of where I think you do that really well in your song, American Gospel. Let's listen to that for a second.
Blessed are the powerful, blessed are the rich, blessed are the merciless and the hypocrites. They will inherit the empires passing. It's the American gospel. Blessed are the superstars, blessed are the famous, blessed are the ones who make their faces ageless. They will inherit the magazine covers of the American gospel. Come to me, those who have something to give. Come to me, those who are likely to win. Come to me, those who are ruthless and proud of it. Oh, come pledge, come swear, come vote for the American gospel. Don't wait, come trade your soul for the American gospel.
Okay, you in this song, it seems to me, it's jarring at first because I think there's a sense of, in listening to it, there's a realization of just how much Nietzsche has been smuggled in under the name of Jesus in all of our lives, and you kind of, it seems to me, in that song, do what Paul is doing in Romans, starting with Romans 1, look at what the Gentiles are doing to get certain heads nodding, and then turning around and saying, and you're doing the same thing to get to Romans 3. And it seems to me that you do that in this song, that you start with the contrast of how this stuff may be really familiar to us, but it's really alien to everything that's around us and in us.
Yeah, frankly, I was a little surprised that very simple device of just singing the contrast hadn't been done before with the Beatitudes, because it really suddenly struck me as soon as I started writing and singing it, that it was like a very direct yet indirect way to say what I wanted to say. And it's really funny, actually, Russell. Somebody came up to me at a concert recently and said, when I first heard that song, I had to listen to it, and I turned it up and I thought, is this Jon Guerra? Boy, he's lost his mind. Until I got to the end, and then I realized, oh, okay, I get it. And I think that is that's really kind of the goal. I think wherever you find yourself on the political spectrum, it's very easy to just get kind of pulled along the current. When you're swimming in the ocean, sometimes you find yourself like, okay, I came out over here, and there's my blanket, and there's my chair. And then maybe you swim for a while, and then you look at the shore and you're like, wait, I've drifted. And actually my blanket and chair are now in a different place from where I am. And I think that happens culturally very easily. And, the song American Gospel, it was really just an attempt to kind of try to orient us, like, okay, where is the kingdom and where are we?
that guy at the concert sounds like the angry letter that came in about screw tape letters. This is terrible advice, and some of it is positively diabolical.
Oh man, yeah.
What do you
Things
think?
change, but not so much.
What do you think of? I mean, the things that Jesus is saying in the Sermon on the Mount would have been astounding, would have sounded crazy to the people who are gathered around hearing it. What do you think is most countercultural right now in American life about what Jesus is saying in the Sermon on the Mount?
First thing that comes to mind is, well, blessed are the meek and blessed are the pure. I think meekness is, it almost feels like we are back in kind of barbarian times where to be weak was seen as actually, to be powerful and to be strong and to be this sort of muscular, to have a muscular energy is kind of glorified, and sort of to be meek and thoughtful, reserved, has sort of, I mean, that's certainly not a way to win votes and certainly not a way to make headlines. And then purity, I'm just struck when blessed are the pure, for they will see God. There's something about the vision of God that a prerequisite of the vision of God is a purity, is an inner purity, is a holiness. And even many of us in the name of God, we sort of we've resolved to just, we're in a mud fight, so let's just get in the mud and start throwing mud. That's what we're doing. And I think meekness and purity would have to be the most countercultural. What would you say, Russell? I'd be so curious what you think about that question.
I think that's right. I think especially, well, I think in two different ways. With meekness, yes, there's this adoption of the attributes of a Roman centurion, even by people who claim the name of Christ right now, and present it as Christian. I mean, I was thinking about this morning when reports are coming out about Elon Musk wanting to have a lot of children because he thinks the apocalypse is coming and he wants to have a legion. And I'm just stepping back to realize how the word legion is used in the New Testament in such a completely different, less positive
crazy.
sort of way. But yeah, I think
almost like Babylon Bee level.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
There's something very, even the embodiment of Christ. We're in Holy Week now, and it was recently Palm Sunday, and sort of thinking of Jesus coming in on the donkey, and seeing that as sort of a parody to what a Roman victor would have done, coming in on a horse in a parade. Jesus kind of, literally takes the same rhythms and ritual and just kind of reduces them to something small, because anytime we try to puff ourselves up, it really is just silly. It really is it's like Lord of the Flies level. You see these kids coming up with these arbitrary modes and gestures of grandeur. And it's been sticking with me since Palm Sunday, how Christ he comes in on a colt, and how that, and then how the cross is glory. The cross, and it is foolishness to the world, but to us it's salvation, and this is the glory of God. It is the scandal of the cross. And I forget what theologian, I think it was Bultmann, who said all theology must be conducted within earshot of the dying Christ. And I think there's a corollary there with any gesture in public life should be done within earshot of the dying Christ, because that really is that is kind of the North Star for us.
I was just reading someone, and I'm trying to remember who it was, the other day, arguing we know more about God than we know about ourselves. Because this person is talking about how impossible it is to sort of sort through all of my own motives and what comes from my upbringing and what comes from something else, and how to get to that. And Jesus seems to cut through all that pretense. Nathaniel, I know who you are. Woman at the well, I know who you are. I know what's really going on with you. And can say that and can bring that into the open. I mean, that is so different, it seems to me, from the kind of culture we're in right now, where everything has to be pretended, especially across screens. Right? I mean, there's a sense of I can't let down my guard of what my image is, whatever that is, of my political tribe or my sense of success or whatever, without losing something really important and scary. Yeah.
And really, then what you just described is kind of the temptation towards being a Pharisee, because the Pharisees were people who were on the surface very clean and very, they would preach loudly in the synagogue. They would, wear all the accoutrements of religiosity. But when Jesus came, they said he speaks as one who has authority, not like the scribes and Pharisees. And that Greek word, it's like eukosia or
exquisitely.
And it means from one's own being. So Jesus comes along and he's not. The Pharisees would say, so-and-so says this, and so-and-so says this, so-and-so says this. But Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you. He was speaking from this kind of holistic inner sturdiness that kind of, it called out. It called out people's inwardness, whether it was Nathaniel or Woman at the Well. And I think we're living in a time where, because of Zoom, because of our screens, we're constantly being reduced from three-dimensional creatures to two-dimensional creatures. So of course our faith and our Christianity is going to be tempted in the same way, to be exclusively this single dimension of life, which is, how do I appear in front of people in X, Y, or Z scenario, as opposed to living, I guess, with the kind of authority of God, which is this from our beings, this discernment and this wisdom that kind of comes from contact and proximity to the living Spirit of God who forms us from the inside. I think of even the book of Acts, where, Peter gets up and these people are shocked. They're saying, are not these Galileans? How are we hearing them in our own tongue? The authority was so internal to them. They were literally even speaking in people's own language, like, you're speaking my language, literally. And that's such a more robust vision of life with God and life in the kingdom, is this life from the Spirit, not just life from the flesh.
Part of what it seems to be at the root of a lot of that is fear. And I think my favorite song on your new album is one called I See the Birds. Let's listen to a piece of that right now.
You've held me sturdy, you've led me on through years of joy and grief. So don't you leave me all on my own. You know me, Lord, I'm weak. I see the birds up in the air. I know you feed them, I know you care. So won't you teach me how I mean more to you than them in times of trouble? Be my help again.
You know what strikes me the most about that song is the part where you say, do not leave me. And it seems to me, I mean, Hebrews 13:6, keep your life free from the love of money. We're all familiar with that. But it's tied directly with, for he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper, I will not fear. I mean, there's a sense in which this song, you're really getting at the fact that what's behind a lot of our fear of maintaining stuff actually is that we don't want to be left.
Yeah. And there's something about presence and proximity to God that somehow makes the calculus of our living in the world very real reasons to be anxious and scared and fearful. Something about God's presence makes the math make sense. And you mentioned Hebrews. I think of Hebrews 11 as well, where it talks about Abel, Enoch, Abraham, and then it said Noah, and it says these all died in faith, not having seen what was promised. They were seeking a homeland, and they weren't seeking one here. If they were seeking one here, they just would have gone back. But no, they were seeking something that they didn't see, and so God is not ashamed to call them friends and give them a city. So there is something very much a part of faith that is like, no, there's something that's coming. There's something that is not, we are not yet what we will be, nor is the world, which now we're talking about the eschaton. Now we're talking about this kind of forward-looking reality. But that has to speak to our present anxiety and our present fear. I think the only antidote is kind of fixing our eyes by faith on the promises of God, on what is to come. And it's why I think, I say of all the offensive things that Jesus said to our modern sensibilities, this might be the most offensive. Do not be anxious. I mean, I'm not a therapist. That's my wife's job. But even I know when someone comes and says, I'm feeling anxious, the one thing you're never supposed to say is do not be anxious.
Right,
yet he does that.
Calm down.
Yeah. Exactly. And again, I'm not here to untangle what he means. I think that's something you need to untangle and we need to untangle personally. But it's startling and it hits us right where we live because I think he wants us to look by faith to that city that is coming, to that presence that is going to be more full and kind of eradicate that fear and anxiety one day. But we can't live as though it's not there. We kind of have to start there. We have to start with that. And then from there, we cling to the promise of his presence with us now, but presence that is coming in greater fullness later.
My wife and I were one time looking at a house, the realtor showing us houses, and we were in this lady's house that was a friend of a friend, and we walked through the house, and it was piled up. I mean, almost hip deep with just stuff, just plastic flowers and everything that you could just get off the shelves somewhere, and it was hoarders like. And I said to the person who knew her, what's the deal? And she said, well, she was never that way until her husband of 40 years or something left her. And then after that, she started going and buying stuff every day and just kind of filling the house with it. It was kind of a security thing. And I remember thinking, wow, that's really kind of close to what we all are trying to do in some way or the other, just with different junk, but the same sort of place it's coming from.
Yeah. There is something, sane about, the renunciation that the fathers and mothers of the past would do in the desert. They would kind of reveal that, oh man, we really are not made to hoard these things and to hold on to these things that are really passing. But in fact, one can be sustained by God and the Word of God and life with God. Dallas Willard, when he talks about Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, he kind of takes that when Jesus says, "We shall not live by bread alone." He's saying he wasn't speaking figuratively. He was literally being sustained physically by the Word of God, and I love that. I mean, I love that. It's like we need to live as though the spiritual world is as real as tables and chairs. You know, there actually is something behind, beneath, around, above, below us that is truly a little bit thicker and certainly of more significance than, not reducing the significance of our life here now, but just in perspective is kind of dwarfed by that. And when we give ourselves over to materialism, which is very easy to do, it's very comforting, it's kind of like, it just kind of reduces our vision, and it makes us think that really this is all there is, when fundamental premise of Christianity is this is not all there is. There's actually much more.
You actually talk about in one of your songs, Where Your Treasure Is, about the fear of scarcity that you're grappling with in your own life. Let's listen to a piece of that.
There's a day that's been spoken of when the thirsty can come by without a dime and eat, where bread and wine and milk cost nothing. But Lord, if I'm honest, I'm scared to death that if I give my fish and loaves, there won't be anything left for me and my parents, for my wife and my kids. I was born the only child of child immigrants. I never knew that I was different until I made friends. So I faked it till I made it, but the pill was poisonous. Now I'm looking for the lilies, who neither toil nor spin. Father, plant one in my heart and make it grow to be a garden. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What your measure is, it don't measure you also. What you really want will be given to you someday. Lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven. Lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven.
I'm really struck. I mean, this line, I'm scared to death that if I give my fish and loaves, there won't be anything left for me and my parents, for my wife and my kids. I was born the only child of child immigrants. I mean, that shows up, being the child of Cuban refugees, I believe. Shows
in
up
Argentina,
in,
yeah.
What's that?
My dad's from Cuba, mom's from Argentina.
Oh, from Argentina.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That shows up in several of your songs about this sense of how did that contribute to your grappling with sort of American materialism and the spear of scarcity?
You know, I'm still trying to figure that question out. But we metabolize as children, our parents' struggles. You know, my parents are both in ministry and loved me so well, and really, you know, gave me the Lord and gave me so much to that I'm still, I mean, it's so much riches and wealth that I'm still unpacking. But kind of that scarcity immigrant mentality was so close. Like, I grew up hearing stories of my grandma and my dad being sent to Queens in the 60s and landing with nothing, or on my mom's side landing in Iowa and having to start from square one. And I, you know, the proximity to that kind of, I guess, financial and social scarcity, it was very close growing up. And I grew up in Houston, and then Wheaton, Illinois, and kind of went to private schools and sort of always felt that there was that distance between what I was coming from and what some of my classmates were coming from. And that, just trying to figure out as a then adolescent, my own identity and my own relationship to the culture of my parents and the culture that I feel that I'm a part of, which is this sort of third culture reality has been talked about many, many times. There's, the kids who feel like I feel like I'm American in culture, but my culture that I'm coming from with my parents, my grandparents, we speak Spanish, they speak Spanish, and I understand them, but I speak to them in English. And that was certainly in the mix growing up. And I think as I became a father and as my parents are getting older, I think as most people do, you feel that responsibility. You feel that, you want to do right both by your parents and by your kids. And so just kind of seeing the challenge of Christ hitting me with like, no, I know that, John, I see that. And I see that, but trust me in that too. Don't try to make something of yourself so that you can try to solve this problem. Because number one, that's for me to do. It's for me to take care of your parents. It's for me to take care of you, and it's for me to take care of your kids and your wife. And you get to participate in that. This isn't your job, And that, I think, because of age, because of just where I am in life stage, was very, very, very. It was very significant to me when I was writing that song. And again, this is part of just trying to bring my own vulnerability and my own story to bear on these songs and not live on the surface.
A college professor was telling me not long ago about one of his students who's an Iranian student who he said is the best student he's ever had. And he was going to New Jersey to look through some documents at a museum for a project he's working on. And the prof said, I had to say to him, make sure that you take all your papers with you. He said, and it just really struck me to the heart that I had to say that. I mean, there's a lot of fear right now. You mention it some in Citizens, about this sense of precarity, not just in terms of being sent away, but also the kind of hostility that is coming toward a lot of immigrants and refugees right now.
Yeah.
What's the way through that kind of fear?
It's never been more important to fix our eyes on things above and to become disciples of Christ who live in the kingdom, who grow courage and boldness to be able to speak up when we need to. And again, wherever you fall on the political dimension of these things, I think considering the kingdom dimension of what our role and what is required of us as followers of Jesus in a world and in a time in this country when people are scared and people are afraid and people are suffering real losses, familial losses, and try to use our imaginations to imagine the roles being reversed and proceeding accordingly. And really becoming acquainted with what rights this country does afford to not only citizens, but those who are in our country as visitors or as immigrants of one kind or another. Because this really is an amazing country. I mean, this is an amazing place to be. And this is the fact that we have a system of due process, that there is, the police, law enforcement is bound by duty to kind of, if there's, for instance, like a domestic abuse issue or something of illegal immigrants, they actually are bound to just help out in that situation. They don't have to, consider the status before stepping in. And these are things that I think a lot of people don't know, and they're afraid because they think, oh man, now I'm really helpless. But amazing. I know there are Christians just everywhere in the States that are helping in very practical ways, bring awareness, bringing people into their homes, and certainly praying that God's will would happen on earth as it is in heaven.
There might be, to somebody listening to this in their church, a little kid in the situation you were in as an American citizen, but whose parents maybe are not, and who's terrified that something's going to happen to completely disrupt his family. How should a church minister to him right now?
Yeah. Goodness gracious. What a question. Of course, I had the privilege. My parents were both citizens. I remember being a kid and going to the court with them when they took their test and then took the oath. And it was such a joyous day. It was like so just that reality of going from one point to another is kind of emblazoned in my mind. And how should a church minister? I think ministering again with great tenderness and great compassion, and remember that when we stand before God, it is not our earthly citizenship that He's going to be asking us about, but it is going to be our citizenship elsewhere, and it is going to be our ability to have. It seems that the diagnostic for God is our ability to see Christ where maybe He's a little bit obscured. So see Christ in the stranger, see Christ in the least of these, His brethren, see Christ in the orphan and widow. And the degree to which we can see Him in the child of the American citizen who we can see Him in the child. It is kind of the degree to which God seems to evaluate our life, the measure of our Christianity is like, did you see me? Christ, when He says to the churches, I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was hungry and you fed me. And to those of the goats, He says, you didn't see me. I was right there. You didn't see me. And so just try to see Christ in these people. Try to see certainly in the children whose brains are literally, they can't understand the complexity yet. All they know is, okay, this might mean this. And to proceed with compassion, I think is the greatest way we can be.
The week that your last album, American Gospel, came out, I think it was the same week. Text chat. I'm sorry. Let me start over again.
Group text.
A group text of friends of mine. One of them sent out this song and said, this song is just absolutely wrecking me, called Nothing to Say to the New York Times. And he said, and the problem is I literally write for the New York Times. It's my job. And so let's listen to a bit of that.
I got nothing to say to the New York Times. Nothing to say to Fox News. I got nothing to spin, to lose or to win. I've got nothing to say but the truth. I've got nothing to say to the nation or state. Nothing to say to your tribe. No hype and no rally, no votes needing tally. No kingdom but the kingdom that's mine, an eternal kingdom of life. Who do they say that I am? Who do they say that I am? The way and the life and the goodness and the beauty and the truth. Well, that all may be true, but who am I? Who am I to you?
In listening to that song, it takes a little bit of a turn where you start to realize, oh, the one speaking here actually is Jesus before Pilate. And then speaking through that to the rest of us. What were you sort of grappling with when you wrote that song?
I was trying to imagine if Jesus were to give an interview, an op-ed with some of the major news publications, what that conversation would be like. And it took me a while to then just remember that while Pilate wasn't a news organization, he was kind of the stand-in for the powers that be. And Christ spoke of a kingdom that was not of this world, and then he was silent, which I think is the most incredible detail. The fact that he felt no need to justify himself before Pilate, to explain himself. Even Pilate was even willing. You almost get the sense that Jesus is like being kind of a jerk. Like, explain to the guy,
Yeah.
And I think there's at least certainly in that time, it was kind of election season. There were so many people kind of going and trying to be either the defenders of the true gospel or this is what Christ was. And really, the point of Christ's silence was, no. I'm actually not on trial here. What do you think about me? Like, I've already done everything I'm going to do. I've said everything I'm going to say. Now, what do you say about me? And I think that turning of the power dynamic is what I was trying to get across with that song, is like, Jesus would say nothing, because the question isn't to Christ, like, explain yourself. The question that Christ proposes really to all people in all time is, what do you say about me? And that, it becomes a very different conversation then when you start thinking about that, both in your own life, certainly in your own life, but kind of trying to evaluate, okay, what do I actually think about Christ, and how are my actions and my allegiances and my habits, what are they saying about what I think about Christ? Because we are saying what we think about Christ in all those arenas, not just with our mouths, but with our habits, with our lives, with the way we spend our time, where we put our money. And it was sort of a realization for me as I was writing that song, like, no, I have, it doesn't really matter what they say about, what Christ has to say to these people. It's everything all that matters is what we say about him. Just like he asked Peter, who do you say that I am?
One of my top two, perhaps, favorite films of all time was a movie I hated in the theater. And that is Terrence Malick's Tree of Life. First time I saw it, I hated it because I didn't get it. Yeah. I didn't understand what was happening. And I watched it again, which I almost never do, but I watched it again.
Yeah, why would you do it if you hated it? What? Yeah.
Well, since then, I had others who were saying to me, well, this is actually what's going on there. And then I watched it again with new eyes, and then watched it again and watched it again. I watched it now, who knows how many times. And it's just a song. It's a movie that just speaks to me in all kinds of ways. And another one that he did, A Hidden Life, is really similar in the way that it works on me. You did music for that film, and I believe you're doing music for another film coming up. What is that? What is that like? How did that happen?
Yeah, so my wife and I were very privileged to do some music for A Hidden Life, and we worked on A Way of the Wind a little bit. That's why we moved to Austin from Chicago to come work on that film. Our job is done now, but what was it like? Well, a friend was working on the film and kind of connected us, and it was a very iterative process. It was very much like a masterclass in, let's try it now this way, and how about this, and what if we reverse it, and what if we try it in a slower tempo, and what about a faster one, and what if, and something that I think I learned from that is that, music can steal upon the subconscious. I said that a little bit earlier, I think in our chat, but which simply means there's so much, whether it's music or movies or news or what have you, even churches, you go into some of these services and you feel like you're being manhandled into feeling something.
Yeah.
Something is being extracted from you. And I think something about the films that you mentioned, Tree of Life and Hidden Life, and something that we had to learn in doing music was, no, we're not, there's a difference between extraction and invitation. Not unlike Moses being told to speak to the rock, and he strikes the rock, and God says, no. It's do not strike when invitation is possible. And that is a lesson both, has been a lesson to me as a songwriter, as an artist, and really as somebody who I'm a worship leader too. That was really my formation for years and years, getting up on Sunday morning with my guitar and participating worship on Sunday morning. And there's a difference when you are trying to extract emotion from people. There's a difference between that and trying to invite them to, through the fruit of lips, acknowledge the glory of who God is and the truth of who he is. There's a very big difference.
How do you know the difference between the extraction and the invitation?
I mean, it's really, one has to develop an emotional sensibility that I think is very sensitive to that, because you feel it when it's happening. You feel it when you're like, oh man, someone is pulling something from me. I'm not saying that experience is always bad. I think that's great for certain concerts, but I don't think necessarily that is, we've confused that extraction then with worship, and the surrendered human heart giving itself over to God in praise is the worship. The songs aren't the worship, and the kind of emotion around it can be kind of the vehicle, but the worship is happening in these kind of hidden places, I believe. But I think it has to do with developing sensibilities spiritually and artistically and emotionally that can discern, okay, we're going to invite people. Maybe sometimes you extract, maybe sometimes you hype it up, but yeah.
I think about James Baldwin writing about being a teenage preacher and losing his faith because he realized, he said, I was living backstage and I knew I could play a certain kind of music and get a certain kind of response. I could use my voice in a certain way and get a certain kind of response. And he came to the conclusion this is all just gamesmanship and salesmanship and showmanship, and lost his faith. And it seems to me that's part of what he was hearing. He was seeing the extraction without the invitation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of people's stories. The deconstructionist movement, whatever you want to call it, of the last however many years, so much of it is people responding to an abundance of extraction and manipulation in their formation at church. Now, when I talk to that crowd and people that are in that category, the conversation then I try to have with them is not unlike C.S. Lewis's essay on transposition, where he talks about, imagine the spiritual world is like the third dimension, and imagine we're living in like a two-dimensional world. How could you explain to a two-dimensional figure the three dimensions? It's like you necessarily have to reduce the reality into something that you can taste, touch, smell, hear, and see. And you're gonna lose some of the texture, but it doesn't mean that the thing behind the thing isn't real. Aquinas defines beauty as goodness made perceptible to the senses, which he's talking about transposition there. He's talking about, of course, transposition is a musical term. It's like there's an orchestra, right, with all the different instruments, and that can be transposed down to a piano piece. So you can play the same piece, but you play it on piano, and maybe that high C, that's flutes and oboes and maybe first violins, but on the piano, it's just bing, bing. It's just that one note. So there's a similar corollary to, I think, our lives in the spirit. And certainly what we're doing in church with music is we're trying to kind of put people in contact with something through transposition, through music, through these very simple means. And my point is there's ways to do it that are beautiful, and there's ways to do it that I think are a little bit more like it's like the difference between maybe going to like a national park or a state park, where it's like it is what it is. It's not extracting. You can recognize it or not, but it's there. Mm-hmm. Versus like a neighborhood park, which is great and it's very functional, but it's not necessarily there to kind of be gazed upon. It's there for a playground. It's there for birthday parties. It's there to maybe run laps. There's kind of a functional element. And I think certainly with worship, sometimes we just overdo that functional. Well, we need people to sing. We need them to respond. We need them to, because when they do that, then maybe they become members. They join a small group. And what I'm just trying to say is I think beauty is invitational. So how do we make these things more beautiful such that people are kind of stirred from within to respond? Maybe our model ought to be the Yosemites, and not necessarily the, local neighborhood park. Just coming up with this off the top of my head. This might not be the greatest analogy, but I think you get my point that there's a difference between something whose intention is to be beheld, that assumes that we're beholders versus assumes that we are creatures, and it assumes that we are like almost consumers. Like consumers, the market extracts dollars from us. Mm-hmm. And to make us a consumer in church, like you're extracting emotion, you're extracting time, you're extracting commitment, you're extracting, all sorts of things. And we're not that. We're meant to be beheld. We're meant to be, we're beings before we're doers. Yeah.
You were a worship leader in a very high profile collapse of a church, Harvest Church in Chicago area with James McDonald being fired while you were there. How did you not deconstruct? I mean, a lot of people when they see that sort of conflict and meltdown and revelation and so forth, they lose their faith, and you didn't. Why not?
I mean, I think the honest answer is just the grace of God. And I don't mean that to be a cheap out to the answer, but it was a confusing time for my wife and I. And, we chose to stay and to lean into the congregation for, I think it was like a year and a half, maybe, until we moved to Austin. And, frankly, it's like these things are so ugly, and it is very easy to kind of console oneself with black and white narratives in which you are the saint and the other person is the perpetrator. And I think that's just dishonest. It's dark, but at minimum it's just a dishonest way to go through life, because it is never that simple. I would say that there was certainly some gestures of deconstruction is such a strong word, but I guess to use, there were gestures of deconstruct. Like when I came down to Austin, and then we joined a PCA church, and I started doing music there, and it was a very simple operation. I would actually show up to church with my 2-year-old and set up the little PA system. It was just like a couple things, you plug it in and put some chairs in, and I would sing a few songs, and at the end of the service I would tear it down, and it was very different than what I'd done for years, which I cherished those years. I mean, some of our closest relationships are still there. And again, not to throw, really didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there is something beautiful, I think, that we've since become Anglican and very much enjoy that. Love the liturgy, love the connection to the confessions, and really to the historic church. But there is something that if I could, transgress modern culture and say something positive about the evangelical church for a moment, there is something beautiful and something about the immediacy of an evangelical church, where you come in and it really is the point is contact. You're trying to have contact with each other, and they're trying to facilitate at its best contact with God. And that can get wacky and that can get goofy, and we've all heard a million words about that. But at its root, this core of like, man, we're trying to create this structure in which somebody who in Chicago, for instance, is hot dog eating mechanic, hockey jersey wearing guy who was a guy in my small group that I loved very much, and somebody else who's like a high powered attorney who watches Terrence Malik films and reads Marilyn Robinson and whatever. These people can come together and see each other as brothers and worship alongside each other and find common ground. I mean, that I think is the beauty of this of the evangelical church. And I experienced that. I mean, I experienced, I was just so many times just blown away at how really the Spirit of God can move in and through and among us in ways that really was beyond the natural connections that we normally would have had. And I think holding on to that helped with the, then when it got really nasty and really ugly and really just disappointing on all sides, you're able to see, okay, well, there's actually something going on here that is beyond what we can see. And there was something happening here that is going to continue whether or not it's at this church or not. I mean, that's as best as I can say. I really do feel for people who've gone through something and been that close to it. I will say nobody leaves unscathed, and that's just so sad. Even people that weren't a part of it, the witness of it is probably the saddest thing to me. That just how public the witness, the fall is, and probably needs to be, both for a million reasons, but it's just sad that those are the things that make the headlines.
One of the things that we do on this program, one of the things that I do every week in the newsletter is a desert island playlist. And I want to tailor it a little bit for you and to say, you're going to be on a desert island the rest of your life. You're going to have no contact with anybody. You have to choose 5 singer-songwriters, not Christian, but just generally 5 singer-songwriters, and you have access to all of their work for the rest of your life. Who's the 5 you're going to choose?
Oh, man. Well, if I wasn't going to choose composers, I'm going to take you at your word and just do singer-songwriters. I've got to say Paul McCartney. I've got to say Sufjan Stevens. I've got to say Bob Dylan. I've got to say, assuming that my kids are on the island with me, hoping that they are, Isaiah Berlin. And then who would the 5th one be? Oh, man. Keith Green.
Keith Green. Yeah. Did you see A Total Unknown?
What's that?
Did you see A Complete Unknown?
Oh, yeah.
Movie?
I sure did.
What did you think of it?
I loved it. I mean, I can't get enough of that era of Dylan. I don't care for Chalamet too much. It just feels like I was watching him a little. I think Dylan was a little bit more goofy than Chalamet played him, but frankly, I would watch another 10 films about that season because I can't get enough of it.
Agreed. Jon Guerra's album is called Jesus. You need to check it out. It's more than just an album. It really will invite you to ask some really hard questions and to encounter Jesus again. You can find it wherever you listen to music. Thanks for listening to The Russell Moore Show. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next time.
Different rich, different money, a different treasure that no thief can swindle it all. We need someone to find us and free us.